Epworth Healthcare is a pioneering and visionary institution celebrating 100 years of service to the Victorian community. Established by the public-spirited philanthropic donations of its benefactors, Epworth has grown into one of the leading healthcare providers in Australia. Since its foundation, Epworth's focus has always been to provide exceptional medical care. They believe that in order to provide exemplary patient care, connection with patients must remain a top priority while still spearheading medical advancement and life-changing research. Here we take a look at Epworth's story, told by its people.
The Methodist Church has had a long history of connection to both education and health, and specifically in about 1912, a minister by the name of Reverend William Palamountain had a dream that there could be healthcare offered for people, what was called intermediate healthcare, which wasn't as high paying as private healthcare, but not in the public sector. So it started very small foundations and a dream that Epworth would be a hospital that would be a landmark for Melbourne and people would be able to go there for their health.
Aaron Danks came in and ended up donating £6,000, which bought Yelko Winner, and it was set on almost 2 acres of grounds and beautiful gardens. And so that was the foundation of Epworth Hospital.
Aaron is my great-grandfather. And from what we know as a family, obviously an industrialist, a philanthropist, and a bit of a man about town. We know that he was a long-serving member of what was the Melbourne Hospital / the Royal Melbourne Hospital Management Committee. He was on the committee for 23 years and he was a president for 9 years. So generally I'd say medical, hospital, community would be an indication of his general involvement.
The only reason that Epworth is here and the only way that we're able to be established as an organisation was through the generosity of our community. And that comes back to Reverend Palamountain, who was essentially the first fundraiser at Epworth. Some of our early philanthropists were Sir Aaron Danks, who made the initial gift. We had Fred Cato from Cato and Moran, the great supermarket chain. We also had the Nicholas brothers, who again were great philanthropists who all supported the idea of establishing the hospital.
I am Fred's great-grandson. His youngest daughter, Dora, was my grandmother. I never met Fred, as I was born 17 years after his death, but I learned a lot through my grandmother and her siblings of Fred's life. He was a completely self-made man. I think that in relation to Epworth, he had a real attachment to the hospital and to the idea of the hospital. There at its conception, he was on the committee that formed it, and he saw it through effectively until his death. He was absolutely devoted to seeing it provide a quality level of medical care for those in his faith. And that seems to me to have been a hallmark of his personality, and that is his determination to get something done, and that he did.
The concept of an intermediate hospital was raised at the annual Methodist Conference in Melbourne by Reverend Palamountain, and support from philanthropists and the community soon followed, with significant donations that enabled the establishment of Epworth. Ethel Gray had been carefully selected as matron, and a letter of offer was sent. Meanwhile, Epworth Intermediate Hospital, consisting of 25 beds, opened its doors to great fanfare on the 27th of February 1920 under the care of acting matron Jones. The hospital filled quickly and received approval to become a teaching hospital. The nurses' training school opened in 1921.
Yes, the church was recruiting for nurses and probably doctors through the Spectator, but they also used informal channels as well. With the nurses, a lot of them were recruited straight from Methodist Ladies' College, and a lot of girls from the country would probably have come through the Spectator. There was big double-page spreads when the hospital opened and all that, so these young girls would have seen those and thought, that's the place for me.
Ethel Gray was the desired person to appoint as matron of the hospital. Her impeccable resume, along with her commitment to the war effort, made her the perfect person to oversee the daily management of the hospital. A letter was sent to Ethel Gray while she was in England, offering her the position with hopes that she would take up the role and align her passion for patient-centred care with Epworth's own vision.
She was a wonderful woman. She trained in Melbourne and then went to Perth and became a matron over there eventually. When World War I broke out, she went overseas as a matron. Epworth decided very quickly that she was the one they wanted. She'd won the Royal Red Cross during the war. She didn't really know when she'd be back because after the war, the shipping was so unreliable. They actually appointed a temporary matron, someone called Matron Jones. Then they basically kept the position open until Matron Gray came home.
The Matrons of Epworth were the backbone of the daily workings of the hospital, particularly in its formative years. They were strong, formidable women who dedicated their lives to the smooth running of the hospital and the provision of excellent care for their patients. The early Matrons of Epworth, like Ethel Gray and the long-serving Marjorie Holding, are fondly remembered to this day.
She really had a very hands-on approach, but always it was in the interests of the patients and putting that sort of care for the patients first.
The popularity of the hospital grew exponentially during the 1920s. The hospital balcony was roofed and turned into a ward to accommodate more beds. In 1923, Fred Cato laid the foundation stone for the new Cato wing. This addition helped serve more members of the community, bringing the total beds to 85. Ultimately, the hospital was to be completely redeveloped in 2 phases, and plans to expand were drawn up in 1927. The foundation stone for the East Wing was laid by Ethel Gray in 1929, and the following year the new development opened and gave way for maternity services to be introduced to the hospital, with the first baby born on the 20th of April. The West Wing was developed to fully incorporate Yalkawinna and create a uniform appearance, bringing the total number of beds to 200. The much-loved Matron Gray retired in 1939. After 19 years of service, she became a member of the Board of Trustees and continued to guide her beloved hospital until her passing in 1962.
My great-aunt was Marjorie Holding. She was a student at MLC here in Melbourne, and after her leaving certificate, she came to Epworth as what was called a probationer in 1927, a trainee nurse. In 1929, she was top of her class. And she stayed at Epworth and practiced her nursing here, gained certificates in general nursing and obstetrics, and rose to become the sister in charge of the operating theatre. She then travelled overseas and joined the Australian Army Nursing Service and saw service in the Middle East and in New Guinea. She was welcomed back to Epworth in 1946, and in 1947 was appointed matron and remained in that role through to her retirement in 1973. We're very taken with the fact that our great-aunt was so devoted to Epworth for the greater part of her life and was able to make such a contribution here. We're very proud of what she did. I think she found her niche here. From the moment she started training, she became very attached to the hospital. Its philosophy. She was a great Christian in her own life, a practicing member of the Methodist Church, and she found great links here in that way as well.
Epworth had become a leading employer for women. The construction of the new nurses' home in 1940 enabled the hospital to enrol probationers in higher numbers, creating a steady stream of well-trained staff to support the hospital. After Matron Gray's retirement, she was followed by Nona Griffiths and then Susanna Monkhouse, until Marjorie Holding assumed the role in 1947. Matron Holding was to become the longest-serving matron in Epworth's history. Fundraising was an ever-present activity, and the Epworth Auxiliary was founded to allow more people to be involved in giving through community events. Epworth entered the 50s with a wide service offering, but shortages of nurses forced parts of the hospital to close.
Epworth's always been part of my life because I was born at Epworth, and Matron Monkhouse was my godmother. And of course, then I went to Epworth to train, and I trained there probably in 1952 to 55. I was an only child, and I had gone to boarding school at MLC, and of course I had never had sisters or brothers. It was lovely having the company of other girls and feeling I had all those sisters. And I think when I went to Epworth, Epworth was much the same.
They believed it was a vocation, and the women that took it on saw that this was something they were giving back to the community. So for some women, it gave them independence. For a lot of those women, they also became senior staff. Some never married, and this became their whole life work.
Nurses were expected to live on site. Of course, they worked long hours. They were expected to attend lectures, whether or not it was their day off.
We used to borrow each other's clothes, and it was just like being a family, really. Well, it was 3 floors, and there was also a basement floor, and the people that were on night duty slept down in the basement area.
My great aunt lived here. There was a matron's flat above what was then the entrance to the hospital in Erin Street. As young children and even as adolescent children, we came and stayed with her. We stayed in the matron's flat. I can picture it today just as I could all those years ago. We loved it. We loved being with her. We loved the sense of being in a hospital.
I think they worked hard and long, but they also had quite a lot of fun as well. Later in the 50s, I met a group of nurses. They obviously had a lot of fun with the hospital dummy, who they nicknamed as Mrs. Wesley.
Matron Holding, from my perspective, really was a wonderful woman. I loved the way she
was firm.
Yes, she was. She was always calm. I never saw her flustered, no matter what happened. Even when I was down in the laundry, because the laundry people had gone on strike, I was on the other end of the big rollers as we were rolling the sheets through.
Yes.
And she reminded me of what it must have been like to be in the army during the war.
Oh, she was.
Because, you know, you just had to get on and do what was needed and not make a fuss about the small issues, you know. And I did have to I was called to her twice. For disciplinary reasons, but
you were lucky you only went twice.
Anyway, she said, "I understand there are more children's ward cups in your room than there are in the children's ward, because you know you'd come off duty and you'd put a bit of milk in a cup to have a cup of tea when you got off, and then you'd meet all your mates in your room and chat and everything, and all the china was there, so I had to throw it up.
Talking of coffee in children's ward, I had the most revolting cup of coffee one night, and I realised later it was someone's breast milk, express breast milk that was in the same fridge.
It's been a wonderful privilege to have been part of Epworth, and I think we all feel that, all of us that trained there, because Epworth became very precious to us because we lived there. We lived in a nurse's home, and it was part of our lives. So, of course, our friendships became much closer because we lived together. And those friendships, of course, have stayed with us all these years, and we have wonderful times getting together and thinking about all the past fun and games and things that happened when we were nursing. Very different to nursing today.
The long-awaited Epworth Chapel had been a dream of Ethel Gray's. It was opened in 1962 and featured a beautiful stained glass window. So great was her desire for the building that prior to Ethel's passing, she had donated funds to realise her vision. The chapel was truly a testament to her love of the hospital. The hospital was growing, and building developments in the 70s increased the number of beds and services available. While the hospital had been through a relatively difficult period financially, The future now looked bright for Epworth. The retirement of Marjorie Holding initiated the end of a 53-year era for hospital matrons. Peter Wilson was appointed as General Manager and was ready to take Epworth into a prosperous future while still maintaining the legacy of care that the hospital was known for. Peter's vision to shift Epworth's culture and create Australia's preeminent healthcare service was well underway.
Epworth Medical Foundation was formally started in 1982, and it was Graham Sloman, who at the time had an idea of improving some cardiac labs and equipment here when they were starting the cardiac practice. And his idea was to look at how the community and others could support the hospital with a more formalised form of giving. The Epworth Medical Foundation's always been a key supporter of our major programs here. Traditionally, we always were focused upon equipment. Over time, that's broadened because we realised to give someone the very best care is much broader than just having the best medical equipment. It's having the best medical equipment in the best surrounds, guided by research, delivered by the very best people. And that's now what we actually do. For our staff development, we now have an endowed scholarship program that provides more than 150 scholarships to our staff every single year, so they can go out and learn new skills and learn world-leading techniques and bring them back to assist our community here at Epworth.
Well, Bruce Lockwood was on the Medical Foundation. When I went on to the Medical Foundation, I hadn't known Bruce before, but I had a great admiration for Bruce. Bruce was a man that if he suggested doing something, he got it done. And he raised a tremendous amount of money through the Medical Foundation for Epworth and afterwards too. And Epworth was his great love. And he really just lived with Epworth all the time. He was very supportive of me because I felt rather lost in a way, being the only female with that group of men. I had been privileged to ask to go onto the Medical Foundation. And I was the first woman, and I sat at the table and I listened to all these men around the table, very big businessmen talking about millions, and I thought, what am I doing here? I came back the next month. I said, well, I just know that all the gentlemen here have wives or partners, and I wondered if the wives would be prepared to get together with me and we have a one-off something that we do for the hospital to earn some money. And that is how the Friends of Epworth began.
EMF represents a community of people that simply want to have the very best care, the very best equipment, the very best facilities. So most of our patients who walk into our hospitals every single day are touched by the generosity of others. And I often kind of think that it's the donors that have gone before who help us have this fantastic, great facility to care for people. It's almost like paying it ahead. You have these people who give and support the hospital, but not just for a period of time. They do it because they see the institution and the impact we're having. So I look back at the Danks family, and they made the first gift that really helped us to establish Epworth. All of these years later, the family through the Danks Trust continues to be key philanthropic supporters of the hospital. And it's because the family is still involved, they're still proud, they still believe in that mission of providing great health care to the community.
The 1980 proclamation of the Epworth Hospital Act paved the way for a new chapter for Epworth, setting a course for huge growth and opportunities to provide new and innovative care for its patients. The hospital introduced various surgical units and groundbreaking services, including the Cardiovascular Disease and Coronary Care Unit, MRI and Neurological Centre. There was also the opening of a new leading ICU. Epworth maintained its willingness to invest in technology that would put it at the forefront of medicine. The establishment of the Epworth Medical Foundation created a space for fundraising to purchase world-class equipment, develop new services, and invest in research and education. The establishment of IVF services created hope for many families who would otherwise have been unable to have children. The science was revolutionary, creating life-changing impact on its recipients and the landscape of Australian healthcare. 1988 saw the last graduation of nurses trained at Epworth as the government moved nursing education to universities nationwide. Epworth was emerging as a world leader, prepared to support pioneering ideas that would change the way hospitals approach the delivery of cutting-edge services and treatments. The acquisition of Bethesda Rehabilitation Hospital from the Salvation Army in 1998 meant that Epworth could now add rehabilitation to its service offerings. The merger created the largest single-campus private hospital in Australia.
I approached Peter Wilson, who was the manager at Epworth, said, "Peter, we're looking somewhere to bring the IVF." And he grabbed it with both hands and said, "Yes, we'd love to have you." And consequently, in 1982, we moved to Epworth Hospital. And our first IVF pregnancy at Epworth happened fairly quickly, in about February 1982. And then, of course, went on, and many hundreds or thousands of babies have been conceived at Epworth. It was really exciting because we were having early success. And almost every weekend, we had some other world first. There was world's first frozen embryo babies, the world's first sperm retrieval, where we took sperm surgically from a male, and various other new developments. So there was always a lot of excitement.
I was firstly born in Epworth via IVF. It basically took 5 times until the IVF was successful, and then I was born.
I was getting pretty despondent, actually. It took 5 times, so I was beginning to get very concerned and very anxious that it wasn't going to happen for me. It was traumatic, actually. It was traumatic because obviously you're not conceiving a child, so there's a lot of heartache and a lot of trauma involved in the decision to see somebody, see a doctor about why it wasn't happening. It was a long road, actually.
Fast forward about 19 years, I got into nursing at Deakin and I got a placement at Epworth, and I was in the Epworth Camberwell Rehab, and I did about a 2-week placement there, and I really, really thoroughly enjoyed it. So my lecturer, she said, "Oh, if you really enjoyed it, like, why don't you look at volunteering there?" I think in about May of 2018, I did my first volunteering shift there at Epworth Freemasons in Clarendon Street, and ever since then I've been at Epworth just volunteering, and I've really enjoyed it.
The most joyous moment in my life was when she was handed to me and she was screaming and healthy and alive, and that was the most joyous moment of my life. I'll never forget it. And it's quite emotional when you really think about the impact of what it had on my life. It was, life-altering. And I'm just so grateful. I always say that to the kids, my life just would never have been the same, and I'd never have been the same if I'd never been a mother.
The hospital was enjoying great success when Dennis Hogg was appointed as CEO to chart a new course for Epworth.
The vision was to create a hospital or group of hospitals that provided the best medical care, the most technically advanced. For instance, the Da Vinci robot, which we bought in 2003, was the first in Australia, and no public hospital had one of those. I hadn't had experience in hospitals. I'd had general management experience. I was approached and it sounded interesting, so I thought, well, we'll give it a go. And when I took it on, it was a fairly modern hospital. It just had the new building. It had a very good medical staff and very loyal hospital staff, but it was in a few problems. But the loyal staff got us there and we got through, and in the end, everyone was happy, I think, with the result.
30 years ago, I started at Epworth as a pay clerk. I just arrived from England in 1990, and I've been fortunate through my career that Epworth has supported me with my education. So I studied my degree, my CPA, while I was at Epworth, and I've had a lot of other leadership opportunities during that time. So really being in the right place at the right time, working hard and grabbing all the opportunities as they arose.
The first acquisition we had was Bethesda. That was a bit after we built the Bridge Road building. That was the first major redevelopment in my time, and that changed the hospital significantly, put more operating theatres, more wards.
Well, in the early 80s, Bethesda Hospital, which was a Salvation Army run and owned hospital and had some surgery and actually had midwifery, they decided that they would look at going into rehabilitation, and that's where the head injury program involved, the rehabilitation program. And they expanded it. They started the Transitional Living Centre. They developed what is now our community rehabilitation team. That was all under Bethesda, under the Salvation Army. So when a patient comes to rehabilitation, they're basically readmitted into a different program. They are assigned a therapy team, and the number of therapists on that team depend on their disability and the work that needs to be done. With brain injury, a therapy team would involve obviously a doctor, a rehabilitation physician, nursing staff, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, psychology, both clinical and neuropsychology, social work, and as well we'd have dietitians involved. So it's quite a large team. Most patients really want to get home quickly, and so this is the frustrating stage because their acute treatment is often over, but there's still a lot of recovery of function left to go.
The acquisition of Bethesda Hospital added a missing piece to the Epworth puzzle in the form of their renowned rehabilitation services. Epworth was able to create new service offerings to complement acute medical and surgical treatment, and would continue to deliver and expand on the world-class brain injury and orthopaedic rehabilitation service that began at Bethesda next door.
I've seen a lot of acquisitions and changes. So when I started, we just had the little Richmond Hospital, which was really just the building on Erin Street. And now I think, what we offer our staff in terms of education, opportunities, scholarships, internal leadership programs, is truly amazing.
From the early days as a small 25-bed hospital, Epworth entered the new millennium as an impressive, growing institution with an enduring mission to provide the very best patient care. The opening and acquisition of new hospitals such as Epworth Eastern and Epworth Freemasons turned Epworth from a single campus site into a growing group of hospitals with a common focus on the provision of exceptional medical care. The introduction of new technology such as robot-assisted surgery was providing patients with pioneering treatments. The impact on recovery and patient experience was profound. Epworth continued to invest in research and education, relaunching as a teaching hospital, providing a pathway to support the learning of future generations of nurses, doctors and specialists. The Epworth community was growing with a goal to have the best staff at all levels.
I was first admitted to Epworth in 2006 into ED with a serious brain injury. I spent 2 years at Epworth, just being fed and coming back to life basically. And as far as all my health goes, I'm well at the moment. I just can't walk, so but mentally, I'm really well. So it's been a long journey for me being at Epworth. For now, I've got the official uniform on. I've been here for 6 months doing official volunteer work. What I find is that people, no matter what their health issue is or their diagnosis, everybody needs someone to talk to, I think. I was having my last rites 15 years ago, and with the help of specialists, they saved me. So I feel that, geez, if they can save me, of all people, in the position that I was in back then with my health, then I need to give back. But I also had a journey with somebody else in my life, my dear sister, in the last 3 years here. So it's time for me to give back, to say thank you. I think that's probably the right word, just to say thank you. My sister's name was Flora. She was my full-time carer for 11 years. I lived with her for 53 years, both single. So we were best friends. She was my world. And, sorry. And 3 years ago, she was, while I was here in rehab, she gave me a phone call and said she'd been diagnosed with breast cancer. And so that was okay, we dealt with that, and a month later I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Unfortunately, her cancer progressed to her bones 12 months later. And then a year after that, it progressed to her liver. And she was under the care of Chrissy Lee, in oncology. And I'll tell you a funny story. When Flora was having her first round of chemo, Flora went, oh, stop! And it was Chrissy Lee's first time she was actually going to administer chemo. Her first time ever to a patient. And my sister went, stop, 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 stop. Chrissy said, oh, am I hurting you, am I hurting you? She said, no, 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 you have to meet my nephew. I want you to marry my nephew. Continue now, sorry.
I think connection and building that rapport is the most important thing that you can do as a nurse. And I was just remembering before about a time when I was giving my very first ever chemotherapy, and I was such a nervous Nelly. Like, it was, you know, such a big moment in my nursing career. I went to cannulate a patient and she was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I was like, what? Like, what's going on? And then she tried to set me up with her nephew, and the nephew's mum was in the background, and that was our rapport for that whole time of her, you know, her couple of years of treatment. So that was the running joke. I think as a nurse, you've got to obviously be professional, but you have to, you know, have your walls down a little bit so you can build that connection, and that connection can last, because that's, you know, especially patients who are coming in and out of treatment, you know, they see your face and, you know, they might be the one that, you know, they call in a time that's otherwise they don't know who else to call. And I really remember that it's all those little times where you sort of bounce in with a smile, or you can cry with the family, or you've had a little funny running joke, that all those moments have led to a really nice outcome in an otherwise not so nice situation.
Chrissy Lee's actually become a bit of a family member now. She didn't marry my nephew, just so you know, but so my sister had a good journey here. I wouldn't call it a bad journey. It's just unfortunate that I lost her. That's all. I do this to honour her too, you know. Because she said to me, Christine, you talk, you talk, you talk. Go and talk to other people next. I won't be around. Where Flora was in her last hour, Chrissy Lee came from home to be with her. She didn't have to do that. She's unbelievable. Yeah, she holds a really special place in my heart. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I ended up choosing oncology probably because I had an experience when I was on my neurology placement or my neurology rotation, where my very first shift, 2 hours in, I was sort of bouncing around and bounced into this room as an eager little nurse, and the room was dark, and the patient was palliative. As we were washing that patient, he sadly passed away, and it kind of just made me reflect on, you know, what is a good way to pass away, what is a not so great way to pass away, and then that just became my passion.
People, both patients and staff, are at the forefront of everything that Epworth strives to achieve. Recognising all those connected to the hospital who make it such a warm, inclusive and comforting place is incredibly important to Epworth. It is the people of Epworth who embody the vision and values and make a difference every day.
We provide the hemodialysis service Mondays to Sundays. It is very personalised. It is definitely a privilege for us to be able to provide this service for them and to allow us as their nurses into their lives. When one of my friends told me that she has been diagnosed with kidney failure, I did not hesitate at all, knowing that I have 2 perfectly good kidneys, and I just made the offer. And I said to her, you can accept it and you can reject it, I'll understand. But just so you know, there is one there for you. She obviously accepted, and what followed was 18 months of tests and appointments. My husband put it this way, he said, look, there's a lot of what ifs. And he said, we know for a fact now that your friend is unwell. We know for a fact now that you are well enough to give her a kidney. We know that none of our family members are requiring a kidney. So you're doing this thing now. We don't know what's in the future. So by him saying that reassures in me that, you know, that is true. I don't know what's around the corner.
Back in April of 2017, I was diagnosed as advanced terminal stage 4 breast cancer. Even though I felt healthy, I felt well, it was a shock to the system, especially being told that it had spread to my liver and into my spine. Having had to have back surgery, I think, was one of the hardest things that I had to accept that I had to do, because if I didn't do the back surgery, I was going to be in a wheelchair. Even though having had the back surgery, I could have been in a wheelchair. I didn't have any symptoms. I felt fantastic. So when I was told I was at an advanced stage, you know, stage 4, it just hit me for a 6. It's like, what are you talking about? You're mistaken. Being told only last month that I'm in remission, and it's, how did that happen? And I kept saying to my oncologist, are you sure they're my images? Because I honestly thought that they were somebody else's, because it was just clearing up so, well, quickly. And January 2018, my liver was completely clear. When I was approached to volunteer here in the wig salon, at first I wasn't sure whether I could do it because it was so close to what I was going through. I thought I'll give it a go and see how I'm feeling with it. And it's actually quite healing for me. I feel that I'm healing and helping someone and giving someone strength and hope that they're going to be okay as well, which is very, very rewarding for me. It's an individual journey and everyone's journey is different. I've been very open with my journey because I believe it's about informing people. It's about getting the message out there that if you notice any kind of change, anything that's not normal, well, what you can define as normal, look into it, because it could be cancer. Because if it is cancer and you get it early enough, well, it's the best thing that you could do.
Epworth was a site of Australian and world-first surgeries, such as the removal of a kidney through a 2-centimetre incision using keyhole techniques. Epworth Freemasons became the first and only hospital in Australia to offer a new technique for operating on tumours in adrenal glands. Mental health services were introduced, and the construction of a new hospital in Geelong would see Epworth expand into Victoria's West, and the world saw the first ever fully functioning 3D printed jawbone. With rapid growth comes new faces and staff numbers significantly increased. Epworth was building an enviable team spirit, focused on investing in its people in order to prepare for the future and enhance patient care. Throughout the dramatic transformation from a small hospital in Richmond to one of the country's leading healthcare groups, the central tenets of Epworth's vision of care have remained. Reverend Palamountain's initial dream of opening a hospital for the people is as true today as it was when Epworth first began.
MOCI, as we like to refer to it, is split up into molecular oncology and then cancer immunology. So the MO, the molecular oncology, is essentially us looking into the molecular space, so looking at the molecular aspects of cancer. The CI stands for the cancer immunology, and that's looking at the disease from an immunological perspective, how the immune system responds to the cancer and what treatments we can use in that space. We would like to be able to be in a situation where we can actually treat each patient individually, and that's our goal. So no two patients are the same. And so we devote a lot of our time to understanding the biology and the molecular oncology of each of our patients and how their system responds. I think we are heading towards a world without chemotherapy. I think the way that we treat patients now over the last 2 decades has changed enormously. Understanding the nature of the disease differently, not as a blanket rule, but rather as a unique representation for each patient. There is a new phenomenon now whereby bad cells could be taken out of a patient. They're not only flushed and then put back through. Now we're in a situation where we can actually manipulate the genes of these patient cells and then reinfuse them back into the patient. And this is referred to as CAR T-cell therapy. And this is a therapy that our team are going to carry out here at Epworth, an incredible vision that we are embarking on, this is going to cater for an enormous patient population. This is going to allow patients to not have to go offshore. This is a treatment that is groundbreaking. It's novel.
You see these sort of, miracle treatments and you think, well, it is all a matter of putting A with B. And, that's what personalised medicine's about. It's trying to get A and B. And the frustrating bit can only be our impatience trying to get B. And when you hit that and you start to see the power of what this could be, now, but in 5 and 10 years, it's pretty exciting. We have the new cancer centre at Freemasons. Part of that approach is to be able to do some of these new innovative therapies, to be able to collect patient cells, manipulate those cells, get them processed, all initially as part of clinical trials, but then these new treatments will become standard therapies. There's a big team behind it. There's been a huge amount of enthusiasm from Epworth itself. We've got some great philanthropic support in getting the resources to get this moving.
And part of the reason that I chose neurology as a specialty, it's a complex area. So in my working life, we've gone from the patient's had a stroke, there's not much we can do about it, to being able to have patients come in with what would be a devastating stroke, be treated, within 48 hours be back to normal and be able to go home. That's revolutionary. The first couple of patients who we thrombolised was like Lazarus. The patient comes in, unable to speak, unable to move one side of the body. You treat them, the clot dissolves, the blood flow goes back to the brain. They literally wake up, they start talking and the weakness disappears. They estimate you lose 1 million neurons a minute. So they've calculated that every minute of delay is equivalent to a month of disability. So that's clinically why I wanted to set up an excellent service. And we have here world-class vascular surgeons. So if they've got a narrowing in the vessels in the neck causing the symptoms, we can get it sorted quickly. If they've got an underlying cardiac problem, we have an excellent group of cardiologists who can rapidly investigate, sort and treat them. So that gives me huge excitement to see somebody recover so well. Geelong Hospital's opened up, they have a neuroscience services there. Geelong Rehabilitation has opened up. There's a rehabilitation service at Brighton, at Camberwell, at Hawthorn. Epworth Richmond service has a stroke unit. They have specialist movement disorder program. They're setting up some of the neurosurgery with the brain stimulators for patients with Parkinson's disease. It's an exciting time to be part of Epworth.
Having been around now for 100 years and obviously having plans to continue on for at least another century, I think it's really important that we have that longevity where we can make investments for the long term. We obviously need to respond to what's happening in the environment around us, but we also can invest in our facilities, in equipment and technology, and also make investments in our people, knowing that we're going to be around for a long period of time. So we've just come out of an amazing period of growth. In the last 5 years, we've opened a new hospital in Geelong, we've expanded our Richmond hospital, just opened a new redevelopment at Epworth Freemasons, and we're also building to expand our hospital in Box Hill at Epworth Eastern. So while maybe the rate of growth of our facilities might slow a little bit in the near future, we'll continue to grow. We'll continue to invest in equipment and technology. We have great aspirations to become a much more digital organisation. And we'll also continue to play a major role in research. One of the things that attracted me to Epworth was the fact that we invest in research, we invest in education and training, and all of those things make for a really exciting time ahead.
The last 100 years has seen the establishment and development of a unique institution. Epworth has made its mark in Australian healthcare through a philosophy of developing research, improving medical knowledge, and providing excellent care for many generations. However, while technology and education have changed vastly over the last century, the people of Epworth are unwavering in their commitment to improving the health, well-being, and experience of Victorians, just as its founders had been during the hospital's inception. This is why Victorians have entrusted Epworth with their care for 100 years, and why Epworth will continue this tradition of care into the future.
The amazing thing about working at Epworth in a whole is that I can go into any ward and I'll know a familiar face who will openly give me a welcome hug or a hug to, you know, just lift you back up in spirit. We are workmates, but we're more like sisters and brothers. We're just one big, happy family.
When I've recruited staff and had the chance to speak to young minds, I always like to say to them, you might only be one person, but if you can make a difference in one person's life in that one day, then it's worth it.
People might say it's just a hospital, but I don't see it as just being a hospital. I see it as a place of care, you know, with everybody around you, not even down to the cafe, you know, even down to the kitchen staff, you know. It's not just, you can't put into one little package and go, yeah, it's just the doctors, because it's not. Because there's a whole team, isn't there, working to help you as a patient, as a visitor, you know, as a family member, as no matter what your purpose is of being here, there's always somebody around to help you.